Hey there, it's Chrissy and Charlie from Forward Thinking, and on today's episode, we're going to be covering a controversial topic, I would say. And you know, it's everyone's favorite controversial topics, but it's MQLs. And we're actually, this is kind of a marketing ops debate. So Charlie's been doing some LinkedIn posts with the hashtag marketing ops debate and putting some questions out there that get everyone fired up. And you know,
people have a lot of opinions in marketing operations.
Yeah, we are quite opinionated in marketing ops. So actually I think everyone's
Why do you think that is?
I
think maybe because there's so many different ways you can do things and they all have their pros and cons.
Yeah, and I think everyone gets into a habit of doing things a certain way, and I think sometimes you don't want to figure out that there might be a better one.
Yeah, or you get into the habit and then there has to be the contrarians out there that are pushing the other narrative that you're doing everything wrong.
Right.
So yeah, it's an interesting world to be in.
But I like this topic because this is basically a revisit and maybe even a change of mind for you. And this is what I think also.
Wow, people can change their minds these days?
Yeah, people can change their mind. Like, you know, you might like a band when you're like 10 years old, but maybe you change your mind later. You know, something like that. So yeah.
Okay.
Tastes change, opinions change. And so so
what are we talking about?
We're talking about MQLs. Mm-hmm. And on our last podcast, you know, you kind of put all the reasons out there why people should care less about MQLs and why MQLs are basically just a guess.
And that was, I can't even remember when that was, Mal. Definitely almost a year ago, maybe.
Yeah, one of our first first few episodes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so now you're in
different mindset.
Maybe just a different,
more nuanced.
Yeah, it's more nuanced. So let's just get to it. I mean, for back then, we were talking about MQLs being just a guess. And I think part of that was that everyone continued to put all of their focus on MQLs and the reporting and why we just talked about that's just not the right metric to look at. You should be focusing on pipeline and revenue. And I think that still holds true, but maybe you talk about, it sounds like you're maybe changing your mind. You might even like MQLs now.
Well, I call it my love, hate, like MQL journey. So back, 10 years ago or several years ago, MQLs was a big deal. I felt like it was something I looked at a lot. Then about 5 or so years ago, I started to get a bit disillusioned with MQLs. Mm-hmm. I hate to say this, but I feel like I hated MQLs before it was cool to hate MQLs.
You're hipster.
Yeah. Why did the hipster burn his mouth on a pizza? He ate it before it was cool. Before it was cool. Anyway, so the journey in my mind was so, and actually I wrote about this in the newsletter last weekend around kind of the history of the MQL and why people hate them now. So maybe I'll go into that. And I think because that was why I started to really dislike MQLs. And so in the newsletter, I had a few bullet points, and the main reason why people started to get just so upset with them was that marketing started to just get way too focused with MQLs. Mm-hmm. It was like the number one metric they were looking at. How many MQLs did I get from this event? How many MQLs am I getting each quarter? How many MQLs have I got this year? What is my MQL goal? And at the same time, they weren't really looking at pipeline revenue, like you mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. So then what does that do, right? What gets measured gets managed, that famous quote. So everyone was just trying to generate MQLs. Mm-hmm. The goal was just to create more MQLs. And like in the video that I talked about a while back, it's so easily manipulated, right? Mm-hmm. What's the fastest way to generate more MQLs? Like lower the threshold. So
does anyone have like a threshold anymore? That's like,
yeah.
that's what ended up happening. Is like basically if you just like sneeze, you became an MQL.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, they were so marketing's MQLing basically anything, right? And then you started realizing, oh, wait a sec, the conversion rate, when we look at funnel metrics, the conversion rate from MQL to pipeline is like less than 1%. Oh my God, we're really wasting a lot of our SDRs and sales team time. You know, it creates that a bit of drama between those two teams. And then you realize, okay, wait, MQLs don't really mean much, right? Like you can't pay your bills with an MQL, right? You can't pay your staff. Investors don't particularly care about MQLs. So, you know, they care about revenue and growth. So now everyone thinks the marketing isn't driving revenue. And that's where we got to the point, you know, as this wave started with people hating MQLs because people were just too focused on them, right? And it was kind of a mutually exclusive situation where we were focusing on MQLs and we weren't focusing on pipeline or revenue.
Yeah. And I think the key thing there is it's just like not standard as well. I think it's like and people will always say like, how do I generate more MQLs? I wrote a post about this last week, and it, you know, part of that is, you know, why are you even trying to answer that question? Is that going to solve your problem? Because I think we'll always see kind of symptoms to trying to just handle that. You generate more MQLs, even if they're not the right fit for you. That means just more stuff the SDR team has to sift through there. And what a result of that too is the SDR team is, can we just automate more of this? And it's like, well, what's their job at that point? And then the good ones aren't getting the proper follow-up. So I think that's wanting to generate more MQLs, and then doing that is just going to further create the problem. So you need to look at, you know, where is the source of that problem, and it probably means like it doesn't mean focus on generating more MQLs. So, but if we do go back to the original idea of an MQL, I think that's where maybe you can start to like MQLs again. And I think also with just a ton of the data that you can actually operationalize into prioritizing or creating an MQL is maybe where you can change your mind and maybe the business's mind, but still, you know, maybe is that maybe why you're starting to like them? And
that's part of the reason. I think the main reason is that I don't see now, I think with the companies that we work with, and I think a lot of people have cottoned onto this now. I don't think it's mutually exclusive between caring about MQLs and caring about pipeline and revenue. So now you can care about both.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and the thing is, now companies are able to really tie their impact to revenue, and they realize that they have to. Marketing can't be seen as a cost center. Marketing needs to get return on investment and be able to get more funding and more budget next year. And so we need to be able to tie our activities to revenue. And I think a lot of people have cottoned onto that over the last several years. And it, you know, now it's kind of the norm, right? So I see people hate on MQLs now, and I'm like, damn, like, I mean, it's like, and they say everyone should be focused on pipeline and revenue. And I'm like, oh yeah, also in news, water is wet. Like, like, yeah, of course. Like, what marketer doesn't think that anymore?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like old news now that you shouldn't focus on MQLs and you should focus on pipeline and revenue. But you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There is, unless, you know, some companies are different. There's obviously more nuance on nuance and nuance, but there is generally a hand in a B2B. There's generally a handoff between marketing and sales, right? And marketing should be trying to give sales the best leads, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Someone that is showing high intent, is good fit, and is ready for a sales conversation.
Yeah.
So if you have a high threshold for MQL, like maybe it's only demos or only contact us, or a lot of intent and not kind of like this, fluffy way of handing over an MQL, then what is wrong with that? What is saying this is marketing has qualified this and now sales, you are ready.
Yeah.
Now, I think when it comes down to metrics and tracking and performance reviews, looking at MQLs, I don't think that's super important. Focusing on pipeline and revenue is obviously far more important.
Mm-hmm.
But as a leading indicator, I think MQLs give you an idea of, is our marketing mix engaging with the right type of people?
Mm-hmm.
And is it engaging with them well?
Mm-hmm.
And that gives you a pulse check on what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like any other metric. It is not looked at in isolation. Like, you're not only looking at MQLs.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a mature organization, you're looking at that. You're looking at probably even earlier metrics like your web activity. Then you're looking at later stage metrics like revenue and pipeline. And if you're a marketing organization that ties that whole thing together, develops the story, has a good understanding of everything, then I don't see why MQL shouldn't be part of that story anymore. Whereas in the past, I used to think, just scrap it. It leads people down the wrong path. It's stupid. We should dump it. Now I think, if you are, obviously with the caveat, if you are focusing on pipeline and revenue as a marketing organization, and you do have a deep understanding of the programs and how you are impacting revenue, then why not also have a look at MQLs too as part of the story? And it's an earlier stage indication on what's working and what's not working.
Yeah, I think it's all about having it's like anything in life, like having a healthy mindset on how to use it. Like, you can cut out, all carbs from your diet and be keto, but how long can you do that? And is that even really going to solve your problem? Or are you going to fall into other bad habits, or anything? Like, you want to have a balance to all of the metrics that you're using. And I think, to your point too, I think the key thing here is you can do much smarter MQLing and with the data set that we have just at our fingertips. And you can also have a more structured kind of data set for that, as far as, is it tailored toward your target accounts or the right accounts? And I think now more than ever, we have a better insight, all companies, into what their ICP is, and they can actually operationalize that. And then further on from that, you can even, generate more like PQLs. So you can try and gather insights if you have a product or a freemium model that people have access to, and see what their activity is there. That's an awesome source of operationalizing that type of data and get insights into who sales should follow up with, because they can't follow up with every sign up. They can't follow up with every, person that just uses their free tool, but they need a way to pick out the good ones so they can really focus their time. And I think that's the key. This is a source of, from a campaign's perspective, are you generating the right people? And then from a prioritization standpoint, it gives marketing and sales the data that they need to figure out who should get the right follow-up, who should get the most personalized follow-up, who should be followed up right away. And then also maybe what follow-up should be automated, because those are just kind of like people that are kind of like lower level leads that maybe you don't have enough insight into whether they're a good fit, but you still want to give good due diligence. Well, then a scoring model or MQL, PQL model will help you prioritize the right ones for sales, and then leave the rest for some automation. So it can really drive some really cool things operationally that you can do to keep the machine running, but in a way where everyone is maximizing their time and effort.
Right. At its core, it's just a prioritization tool, right?
Yeah.
So I've never heard anyone say prioritization is bad, right? And so if you're able to say, okay, there's like some intelligence that I'm putting into this prioritization framework, which is looking at, are they interested and are they the right fit for us? And I'm going to then use that prioritization framework to then tell sales whether they should care about this or not. And then I want to be able to see, are we generating high priority leads for sales or low priority from different activities? I don't see the problem with that, right? So, and again, this with all the caveats, like, of course, focus on revenue, of course, focus on pipeline, like, who isn't now? And that don't live or die by the MQL number. It can be very misleading. You have to understand where the traps are. But if you're a sophisticated marketer, you're able to really think about it properly. And obviously focus on pipeline and revenue. I said that like 100 times because I want to make sure people are clear. Like, we're not saying only focus on MQLs.
No doubt someone's still going to comment.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem with, all of the stuff on social media. It lacks that you can't be nuanced. One, it doesn't get, if you're too nuanced and you're too like kind of, it depends, then it doesn't get as much engagement. And then also, it's always good to kind of, like, people love being the contrarian and tell everyone else kind of they're doing the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, so I think the moral of the story is, whether you're calling it an MQL or not, you probably have a process where you're handing leads to sales, right? So like a lot of people, it's easy for them to define it as an MQL, and it does have some value if you are making sure you're focusing on all the right things too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. So
that's it.
Now we kind of like MQL.
We'll do another one in a year. I'll probably hate them again.
But the thing is, and I think this is the key to this, is we like MQLs when they're used properly and then also just operationalized effectively. If you're just saying anyone who just does anything is MQL, not really the case. So, all right. So yeah, we'll revisit this maybe in a year and see if you change your mind, Charlie.
Yeah, probably will have, yeah.
All right. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you have any comments, feel free to send them to us, and we'll see you on the next episode of Forward Thinking.
This is Charlie. So if you liked what you heard, hit like on the platform where you watch this. Also, leave a review. Honestly, we would really, really appreciate it. You can also subscribe where you listen to your podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or even YouTube. And make sure you subscribe to our newsletter, which is packed full of exclusive content, updates for events or courses that we might be doing, all designed to elevate your marketing operations and B2B strategy. See you next time on Forward, and Forward it up.